Welcome one, welcome all to the Snail Trail 4x4 podcast. If you like going off-roading in Toyotas, wrenching on Toyotas, camping in Toyotas, and maybe even poking a little bit of fun at Toyotas, and of course, hearing about how fantastic Moab can be or used to be in Toyotas, then this is the podcast for you. That's right, ladies and germs. My name is Tyler, and this is another lovely episode of the Snail Trail 4x4 podcast. And I am actually recording on my own. Ben, our esteemed guest today, was here. Actually, we took over the Wheeling Wine and Whiskey studio out here at Trail Hero. And I'm back in the studio to record the intro here. And Lorenzo is staring at me. He licked me a couple times. It was a little awkward, but we had a fun little moment there. So I think I will leave him here this time and not take him. I guess last time we took Lorenzo. A couple fellas had some heart palpitations because of it. So we'll leave him here. We won't mess with him. But he is here staring at me awkwardly while I'm recording this. Let's see. We got some housekeeping stuff for you guys. We'll keep it short and sweet because this is a very long episode with a lot of really, really important information. As always, check out our monthly giveaway. You can get signed up over on irate4x4.com over under the Snail Trail 4x4 forum. All your options to sign up are there. The gift box tier is open this month, so you have until October 31st, Halloween. So make sure you do that by earlier in the day so that you get signed up, because the people that control the access will probably be out trick-or-treating late Halloween night, and we'll close it early in the day for you. So make sure you guys get signed up there. We always got stuff going on. Check them out. We got reviews going on for a set of tires. We got swag packs we're doing for those as well. You guys should know all the details about that by now. If this is the first time listening to the Snail Trail 4x4 podcast, welcome. Maybe you came and ended up here from Blue Ribbon Coalition, spreading the podcast around. There's a lot of really good information, like I said earlier, in this episode. There's some really solid call to actions that any and everybody in the vehicular recreation, even outdoor recreation, let's just say screw vehicles, say you like recreating in the outdoors, this episode should piss you off and make you want to do something. We are, of course, talking about Moab and the Labyrinth Rim and Gemini Bridges area that just had a very, very big thing happen. We lost 317 miles of trails and a lot of camping areas, campsites, dispersed campsites, a lot of really cool viewpoints, lookouts that overlook the Green River out there that are absolutely gorgeous. All of it's gone. We no longer have access to it. The light at the end of the tunnel, though, is that after talking with Ben here and listening to some of the stuff he has to say, stuff can get overturned. Nothing is 100% set in stone forever. But there's some really key things that we as a community need to do. So Ben's going to talk a little bit about what's going on out there. It was a really fun episode. Please pay attention, listen to it multiple times. There's going to be a lot of information thrown at you guys, and let's get up and do something about it. So yeah, I think that's about it. We'll keep it here and we'll take a quick break. We'll hear from Brian at 4 Wheel Underground, and we'll be right on back with Ben Burr from Blue Ribbon Coalition.
Do you want to put a Super Duty axle under a 4Runner or an FJ80 axle under a mini truck? At 4 Wheel Underground, we've designed and engineered the fitment, durability, predictability, and drivability for just about any axle you want to put under a Toyota off-road vehicle. Start your adventure with our suspension builder page over at 4wheelunderground.com.
All right, welcome back, everybody. We're sitting here actually in the remote Wheeling Wine and Whiskey studio with Ben back from Blue Ribbon Coalition. Welcome back to the show, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. You know, we're out here at Trail Hero, and I know that you live in the area here, and you actually reached out and was like, we need to get a podcast going about what just happened in Moab. And I was like, you are absolutely correct. We have to. And who's better mind to pick than somebody who's literally involved helping get the pot stirred for what's to come here and what we've got coming up. So remind everybody what you do with Blue Ribbon Coalition. What is Blue Ribbon Coalition? Why should we be listening to you about what just happened, what's been going on, and what we're going to be doing here about it?
Yeah, good question. So I'm Ben. I'm the executive director of the Blue Ribbon Coalition. I've been fulfilling that role for over 2 years now. And in Moab last week, they released a plan where they announced they will be closing 317 miles of some of the best off-road trails on the entire planet. And that's all part of a administrative planning process with the Bureau of Land Management, which is being required because of a court settlement that was entered into with wilderness groups back in 2017, which was part of a legal challenge that goes clear back to 2008, which was part of a process that goes back to even years before that. So we're 20 years into this fight.
20 years into this.
And the Blue Ribbon Coalition has been there all along. We've been doing this since 1987. We're a group that we fight to keep our trails and our recreation experiences open on public land through litigation, through lobbying, through advocacy, and everything we possibly can to fight what is a really difficult uphill battle to keep our recreation areas and access open.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's pretty crazy what we've been seeing going on. I mean, we've been talking about what's been going on in Moab on the podcast sporadically whenever there's a big update. 2 years, I think, that we've kind of been talking about it. We've been covering what's been going on in Oceana Dunes, Pismo area, which was a big win that we just got out of that, which was pretty exciting. I didn't foresee that coming, and it was really cool to see that happen. That actually came through. So people, if you can follow the legal process can work.
Oh, yeah. And with Oceana Dunes, it was a big win, a lot of effort and a lot of money spent just to get an agency to acknowledge what was painfully obvious in the scientific record.
Yes.
And so my hat's off to everyone who was part of that fight. I only ever say good things about what they've done there, but it just shows you what we're up against is that they claim to be making it based on valid science and reasoning and all these things. Then you dig into it and find out
it's all BS.
It's all bunk. I call it soft science. It's sus.
Totally.
And so there's more work to do in Oceana Dunes. I'm glad of the success and the momentum they have. People should be supporting Friends of Oceana Dunes in that fight. It's just ridiculous that it has to go to that much effort just so that basic concepts can be informing public policy instead of radical plans.
Exactly. And that's kind of what we turn the page and what we're looking at here and what's going on in Moab right now.
Yeah.
So the thing that we're talking about in Moab is the Labyrinth Rim and Gemini Bridges area. There's a new travel management plan that kind of controls the route inventory of all of the trails and routes in that geographic region up near Moab, Utah. Yep. And so we had they kind of inventoried everything, and they came to the conclusion we had about 1,200 miles worth of trails. And I
think this one was closer to 1,000.
It was closer to 1,000. Okay,
it's kind of important because we talk about percentages of how much got closed when they closed 317.
So it was about a third. We lost about a third,
about 28%.
So okay, so that makes more sense. About 1,000 miles, and now they had like an ABCD options of what they would close, what they would leave open, and the worst option was about 420 miles of trails they would close. Next one was about 317, and then it drops down to like 80 miles or 70 miles of trails that they were going to close and something like that. And so looking at the option that they took of 317 miles of OHV access trails, I put the list out on my Instagram of some of the really cool sites and points and areas that are getting closed. Hey Joe Canyon, bye-bye.
Closed.
Going bye-bye. There's two of the lookouts on Dead Man Point,
closed,
which I was out at this year at Moab.
Yeah,
and I went on that trail, stopped at those two lookouts. I was like, these are amazing.
Correct.
They have some amazing views of the Green River that you can't really get in a lot of other places anywhere.
No, they're one of a kind scenic views. It's close. Keep
going on. There's I don't remember what the list was. There was 10, 15 trails, places, points of interest.
There's like Mashed Potato Hill or something like that. I don't know all the names of them.
I'm gonna pull it out.
Yeah, pull it up, but I'll keep going. We know the dirt bike crowd got hurt really bad. They have a loop called Dead Cow Loop, which they've put a lot of money and time in maintaining that area. And one of the world-class people come from all over the world to do these dirt bike trails in Moab. And there aren't a lot of single-track trails in this area to begin with, and not in the state of Utah. There's when I work with our folks in Idaho, they have a lot more of a welcoming environment for single-track users. And so Moab was one of these few places where there are some dedicated single-track trails. iconic world-class trails, and they closed Dead Cow Loop. They closed one of the tubes. And so those are impacting our dirt bike users. If you have your list pulled up, you can keep going. I'll add to it.
I've got Day Canyon Point.
Okay, closed.
Gone. Hey Joe Canyon.
Closed.
Mashed Potatoes.
Closed.
10 Mile Canyon.
Closed.
10 Mile Rim.
Closed.
Hell Roaring Canyon.
Closed.
Mineral Canyon.
Closed.
Hidden Canyon.
Closed.
7 Up.
Closed.
Burr's Trail.
If that's named after me, it's closed, I'm sure.
Right? Like, we need to either close it or change the name, one or the other. We're getting sick
there are
of
a lot of,
bed.
so my ancestors settled Moab. And so my family's been going, I've been doing family reunions there for years. And there's a lot of things around that southeastern desert named after people. And so,
I didn't know that.
So my cultural heritage doesn't matter. Closed.
Yeah, you're closed. You're gone. You're out of here. 2 of the 3 overlooks on Dead Man Point, which we talked about. Lost World Butte.
Closed.
The Very End.
Closed.
Most of the Rock Canyon Loop.
Closed.
2 of the 3 overlooks on Taylor Canyon.
Closed. I just went to one of those the week before because I was in the area. I'm like, I'm going to go hit one of these trails that they might close just so I can see what it is. Awesome, spectacular trail. Takes you to an overlook of Canyon lands. Taylor Canyon is part of that. And closed.
Dead Cow Motorcycle Trail.
Closed.
And basically every trail in the vicinity of the South Fork 7 Mile Canyon.
Closed.
Closed. All of that. Gone.
And I would add to that, I mean, we recently released, prior to the release of this volume 2 of our Lost Trails guidebook. And
which you have in your hand right now?
Yes, I have in my hand. And you guys were a sponsor of this guidebook, which we really appreciated. It made it possible for us to print a higher bulk order of copies so we can get them at a lower price per unit. And people are donating to get a copy of this. And you need to get your hands on this fast because there are 6 or 7 trails in the guidebook that will be closed, and we want you to go find these. And what we did here is we went and looked at the trails we were worried were at the risk of highest closure. And we knew we were kind of gambling in doing that some of them would be closed. And so this guidebook's partially, we want you to get out and see these trails. You have at least 30 days to do it from when the decision was released. We'll talk about what our plans are moving forward, but it's possible that some of the legal actions that happen could result in a stay of the decision. That means the trails stay open for a period of time.
Okay.
But once the plan officially goes into effect, some of the trails in this book will be closed, and they don't have names. They're named like convicts on death row. They're just given numbers, and they will be closed. And I was the one who inventoried a lot of these trails, and they are as good as any of those named trails. They go to spectacular overlooks. They have unique obstacles and challenge levels, or they take you into just different parts of hundreds of. We've counted at least over 100 campsites that roads provide access. Inventory sites the BLM in a camping plan decided they would include in their camping plan. Now you can't.
So they're in the camping plan, but there's no access to them.
Yeah, we worried. We raised the alarm about this when we saw the camping plan. We said, look, they're looking at the sites, but if you're not looking at the camping plan and how it relates to the travel plan, they're going to launder these sites out of the system through the travel plan and make it look like, oh, we did this really reasonable camping plan.
Yeah.
And now all the sites are closed through the travel plan. And they'll say, oh, you can still go in and use them. You want to hike it. And so
you got to hike all your camping. I guess that's what backpackers do, but
sure. I mean, but backpackers can do that. There's not an acre of public land that's limited to people that want to have that experience.
Yeah.
If you're into overlanding, if you're into vehicle-based camping of any kind, which a huge number of the population is,
big
especially in Moab, if you were to ask me who the biggest loser on this plan was, overlanders.
100%.
100%. If you were overlanding, you were hurt the most by this plan. Number 2 is just the casual people going out on scenic driving on accessible routes. So you don't have to have a fully rig to go on a lot of these that got closed. And if you're a photographer, like when I was in this area, I mean, I'm seeing all the comments and people are like, oh, the side-by-sides caused this problem. I spent weeks in this area inventorying thousands of trails. I can count on one hand the number of side-by-sides I saw out on the trail. They are not in this area. They go to Hell's Revenge. They go to those areas close to town. And so they do create this concentrated use in certain areas. And so then everybody thinks, oh, that must be what's happening everywhere.
Yeah.
I challenge anybody to prove that that's happening in this area. And I'll challenge the BLM to prove that because I've read their economic impact statement and they said all these closures they're doing won't cause an economic impact because they claim it's only going to cause 7,000 come to Moab out of.
I don't know, man. From looking at the environment, talking to business owners while I was in Moab this year, it sounds like it's a lot more than 7,000. It sounds like most businesses are down about 40%.
That's what I hear. And their vacancy rates are up. The top sales are down.
Yeah.
Everyone's raising their prices, and so the government's looking at it saying, well, we're doing fine because the tax still coming in.
Jeez.
But that's why you had a county commission in Moab that voted to support the most restrictive alternative. Two of those lost. There's the county attorney who was the brainchild of a lot. And several of the rest of them are up for election this year, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But advocating for these restrictions is hitting the bottom line of every
100%.
business in Moab, and they're voting that bottom line right now.
Yeah.
We'll see how this translates into future election results. I mean, we watch it closely. We're a nonprofit, so we don't participate in those elections, but they inform what we do, so we have to pay attention to it. And that's just me observing what happened.
Yeah. It was crazy. When I was coming through St. George and Hurricane this year, I texted you because I was like, hey, I need a good dispersed camping site. Where can we go? And you're like, oh, go check out this area. I went out there. Every single campsite was full with overlanders.
Sorry.
But it just shows
you could have parked in my yard.
Come over and hang out. But I mean, it just goes to show that there's people using these.
Yeah,
they're in use. There's people out here that want to come out and take easy trails to see some really freaking amazing views in Utah, and to take 317, one third almost of the miles of the routes and OHV access in this area.
And a lot of them are the spurs that go out to the overlooks and the campsites. And I've inventoried a lot of those. A portion of the Lost Trails guidebook, we have one section that's just the coordinate campsites.
Oh, wow, to campsites.
And you can just go see some cool places. And I understand the ethics of coordinate sharing. For every coordinate I share, there's probably 20 that I am keeping to myself. But we've seen in the legal arguments that they say that these things should be closed because no one is using them.
Right.
That's the argument we see more commonly in these lawsuits. It isn't that they're overused or trashed or damaged, or that there's resource damage. They claim that the trails aren't being used in the sites. And so we get stuck between this stupid no-win argument that if we overuse them, they need to be closed. If we don't use them, they need to be closed.
Yeah.
And so there's this like perfect level of use of balance. And you look at Sue's ads that they're running all over right now. Like this brings balance back to the force or whatever. And it's like, this is Anakin Skywalker cutting off everyone's head. They're not bringing balance to anything. They're closing it all. And so back to the number one user that got hurt here is the overlanding car base. You 100%. 1,000% screwed by that.
Yeah.
Number two is the state of Utah.
Okay.
The state of Utah has 144 miles. Half of the routes in this area were what are called RS-2477 routes that the state claims they have jurisdiction over. Yes. That's all being adjudicated through a lawsuit that's taking, it's probably been in process over a decade in the federal court and the district court of Utah. And the BLM's just like, we're just going to close them. Even though they're in current litigation.
Yeah, RS-2477 is a pretty big deal. I mean, that's what gives the Rubicon its standing.
Yeah, and what the BLM will say, well, until that adjudication process is done, we're free to act however we want. And if the court rules that that the state does have jurisdiction on these roads, then I guess we'll open them.
You can't just do that. There has to be a stay. That's something to stay that you can't mess with them while that's in legal litigation. I mean,
that's how I see it. It's incredibly frustrating, but the state of Utah the BLM's usually just thrown in a handful of RS-2477s on these that we've seen in the past, and the state's kind of
been like, it's not enough. It's not enough to.
But they've never gone to the mat of saying that's enough. And maybe there's legal arguments as to reasons why, but that means the state of Utah got hurt. So I don't know if that means there's a court action that needs to put there's a big problem there.
Yeah.
Congress perhaps needs to intervene and say none of this travel planning should keep moving forward. They should defund this travel planning process and restrict the BLM from using any funds to implement this and to do any more of these plans until that adjudication happens. If they're going to weaponize this process to close that many of the roads that are under contention,
I mean, that just seems like a huge reach of power. That reminds me of the California Coastal Commission coming in and shutting down Pismo due to some bullshit reason about sand dust.
It is what it is. They've weaponized an otherwise like quasi-legitimate administrative process and radicalized it, and they're just going to challenge everybody to stop them.
Wow.
And so the state of Utah better see themselves as the biggest injured party in this, right below the overlanders. Number three, I'd probably put the Jeepers. Like you read because that's who else is in this area. So full size, I see a lot of built rigs, Jeeps, that when I'm out there, that's what I see. And they'll say, oh, but we didn't close all these Jeep Safari routes. It's like, okay. I mean, the Jeep Safari routes are awesome. We wanted every single one of those open. They did still close about 10% of them. Yeah. But everything that was also closed was still a cool route to go explore in your Jeep. And if you wanted to explore something new, if you wanted to get away from it, if you wanted to get off the beaten path, if you wanted to disperse your impact, you have less options. Yeah. And so that Jeep full-size recreation crowd, I'd probably put the dirt bikes at number 4 just because they have so little dedicated trails. Yeah. To lose some of the most important ones is just ridiculous for them to have to deal with. Yeah. Then I probably put the e-bikes. The e-bikes? Yeah. Well, they gave them a half mile. They said, we throw a bone to the e-bikes, and we gave them a half mile. Oh my God. And they gave the mountain bikers a bunch of trails that the e-bikes will be restricted on that were previously full motorized trails that have now just been converted to bike trails. Bike only. Yeah. And so the bikers kind of won on this. Yeah. But the e-bikers, they're down there on the losing side of the ledger because they somehow can't organize themselves into saying we should be able to use the mountain bike trails. Yeah. Which they will, that'll watch, like mark my words, that'll happen. Yeah. The demographics of that are impossible for the purity culture mountain bikers to forever proclaim that people with class 1 and class 3 e-bikes can't use their trails. Just wait till the wave of retiring baby boomers all ends up with an e-bike on the bike rack on the back of their motorhome. You're not going to stop that. No, yeah. They will vote their right to be there, so just wait for it to happen. It will happen. Well, one of the things that... not through this process, though. Yeah, not through this process. They got a half mile. Yeah. So good for them. Half a mile, that's so funny. But one of the things that Suwa was toting in their victory letter they sent out to all their constituents was that it's a huge win for bringing the sound of nature back to nature, the quietness. Yeah. And I was like, well, what about EVs? EVs don't make near as much noise as a petrol or a diesel engine, whatever it is, a combustion engine, but you guys didn't have anything in there. You haven't given any credence to any electric vehicles at all either. In all no, they ignore that in the analysis completely. And the sound impact, it's a total lie. It's 100% it is a total lie. I've been out there for weeks in this area. And once I get out on the trail, I mean, like them, I'm out there in a vehicle to get there. Yes. The biggest motorized user group in this whole area. Hikers? Nope, it's the boaters. The boaters? Oh, really? Yeah, if you go down Mineral Canyon Road and you just count the traffic of who's coming by, there's all these concessionaires that take people down to the river. That's the one access point where the rafters can go there. Okay. There is more river traffic going in and out of this area on the road. If you're just counting vehicles coming in and out, probably the boaters are the biggest motorized user group total. Okay. They didn't have any of their access restricted in any way, shape, or form. And we'll talk about them in a second. Okay. But they're the biggest user group. But you get out there, and as soon as you once I stopped and turned off whatever vehicle I was in, there's no sound it is silent. Yeah. And so it isn't Sand Hollow where you have an open straight area, pipe. OHV, people with a lot. I mean, there's an occasional vehicle will come by, and the sound impact is dispersed over time and space. Yeah. If you're not close to the point source of the noise, it's pretty, it geometrically decreases in intensity the further you get from it. And it's always temporal. And so the way they calculate a noise impact, no one has a great way of doing it. But if you spread it out over time and space, it's not detectable. Yeah. There is no noise impact. Yeah. And so for them to say that, they're making that argument based off of a false narrative of public perception and not a reality of what's actually happening on the ground. Almost kind of like too much usage destroys trails and too little usage needs to shut them down because they're not being used. Yeah, and those are arguments that only work with people who spend almost no time in this area. Yes. And there is no measurable data source that tells us how much noise pollution or impact or whatever is actually going on that's verifiable, quantifiable, that could be the basis of making an informed, rational decision. Yeah. So instead they just lean on the emotional side of that argument that people don't want noise, they want to be out there in the quiet. And I will bet people money that if you want to go find quiet, I will give you a GPS coordinate on this map
from the book. Yeah.
From the book. And you go there. and it will be quiet. We just had a helicopter fly by. You'll probably have more noise from aircraft that the BLM has no jurisdiction over than you will from the vehicles in this area because they get lost in this landscape.
We're literally in the middle of Trail Hero right now in Sand Hollow. Hundreds, if not thousands, of vehicles, buggies within 5 miles of us. You can't hear what we're hearing is a helicopter, and we're not hearing any vehicles. and I'm okay with aviation use in the backcountry. I don't have any problems with helicopters. I think that they have their own rules and regulations. I should follow them, but they should have access to our public lands just like everybody else should. And so the noise impact is totally overblown. Is there something to be said then about the SUA and the other side making these false claims, and we just keep kind of chasing our tails fighting these false claims rather than fighting and changing the narrative of what we should really be focusing on?
Yeah, no, we should be doing everything we can as we need to become an organized movement. We need to be controlling the narrative around these issues because that's what SUA does well, and the way they do it's kind of old school. It's kind of early 2000s style of media influence where they have their friends in media that get their narrative out and legitimize it through the credibility of the publication. And they kind of lean on that. And then there's a whole ecosystem of other nonprofits and others that kind of promote and share each other's ideas and use the same wording. On the other hand, we as the motorized recreation community and the broader recreation community, because this isn't just impacting motorized I think almost all users are motorized. They just don't always categorize themselves as this way. So we kind of create these false categories.
Yes. How many SUA followers and constituents realize that they can't get to these dispersed campsites anymore, and they can't get to places that they would normally go out and recreate now because they can't drive their vehicle all of them. That was a big thing. That was like
I took the pictures of the Subarus out there with their Protect Wild Utah stickers. They're hurting their own members. They just won't tell the truth about that.
Yes, exactly.
And so but this outdoor recreation culture is an absolute juggernaut.
Yes.
If we look at the numbers economically, as big as oil and gas.
Are you serious? It's that big?
Almost $900 billion.
Wow.
And if you then look at the statistics of what are the biggest sections of that industry, when you look at the Bureau of Economic and National...
I think we talked about this last time we had you on the show.
Yeah.
Go over it.
The biggest is motorboats and fishing. Number 2 is RVs. Number 3 is hunting, which all of these have a huge motorized component to them. Number 4 is motorized recreation, which is ATVs, motorcycles, and side-by-sides. And number 5 is snow, which includes skiing, snowboarding, and that's big money recreation, but also snowmobiles.
Yeah.
And they lump those all together. And
so the top 5 are all
motorized,
very ingrained in motorized use.
And any one of those is bigger than all the rest of it combined.
That's so crazy.
And so the day we wake up and start acting as big as we are, we will be the center of gravity of this whole policy. Yeah. And there's enough of that's the economic number. So the money's there. We could be funding the best lawyers on the planet to be fighting for our advocacy. But instead of showing up to lawyer fights with lawyers, we show up with volunteers and trailhead kiosks, and then we get our butts kicked.
Yeah.
And so it's time for the industry to start rethinking its priorities.
Yeah.
And throw its money and its weight around and the things that matter, which is winning lawsuits, influencing election, and then lobbying and getting bills passed that codify our right to using these areas and these roads and not ceding the whole territory to these. Everyone says, oh, but the environmental groups have so much money and they have so much organization, they have so much influence. And I look at their 990s and sure, they're bigger than ours. But then you look at it compared to how much money's in this industry and it's an absolute joke that they're taken seriously. They don't have a lot of money.
Wow.
Compared to what we have. We're just not choosing to use our potential, our resources in these fights effectively.
Wow.
And so it's got to be a priority shift. And if this Moab action doesn't galvanize that shift in priorities,
I don't know what could.
Then I don't know what could.
Yeah.
And so I'm here saying that we're here with a smart strategic plan of how we want this. And hopefully there are others. I think that you'll see some of the government actors are actually, this isn't a monolithic government decision. This was a decision by a small group of radicals who are abusing their power.
Yes.
There's a lot of government actors that are not happy with this and will be using their resources and their political power to challenge this. And so we expect to see that. But
so let's talk before we get into kind of what is the fight ahead. Let's figure out how did we get to this point? Because you said this has been going on for 20 years. since 2003, 2004, 2008. How did this all start, and how did it get to us all of a sudden losing 28% of our trails?
Yeah. So, I mean, where this really started is the idea of the Wilderness Act. And
what is the Wilderness Act?
The Wilderness Act passed in the 60s basically says we're going to set aside lands for nature and make sure that whatever human use happens in these areas is minimized or restricted, and that these areas are untrammeled by man, and we want wilderness. And then Congress designated a bunch of wilderness. And a lot of times this is just like areas like the tops of mountains where there wasn't the naturally forbidding of human activity to begin with.
Yeah.
But then you had groups like SUA go into an area like Moab and say, this area feels like the wilderness because I can go stand on the edge of this cliff and have this sublime moment where I'm having this great experience with nature. So this checks off the box of what wilderness should be. And so we should designate this as wilderness. And then that message kind of resonates with everybody because that's why you and I go out there. We want to go have that experience with nature. And that's what...
But if you designate somewhere as wilderness, then people don't get to have those experiences anymore, right?
Yeah, and so that's the disconnect, is people think wilderness means them going out and having a backcountry experience with nature.
Yeah.
But you look at the letter of the law of what wilderness is, and it's 5,000 contiguous acres of public land with a road.
Yeah.
And so that's why you see these wilderness groups train all their fire on road, because if there's an area they want to designate wilderness that has a high road density area, which this Moab area does, there's a lot of mining and things like that, and that's how all these roads got built. So historically, you have a lot of roads there. And so technically, letter of the law, it is not eligible for wilderness designation because of all the road density in this area. And so that's why they lie about the side-by-sides and the impacts and the noise and all this stuff, because they're really after closing the roads so they can make it eligible for wilderness. And and on that is something they tell the truth about if you look at what they're saying, because they always talk about their wilderness bill that they've been introducing for decades, that they have to get a senator from Illinois to introduce because they get anybody in the West to touch it. And they can't get it passed, but that's sort of their aspiration, is they want to see 8 million acres of Utah designated as wilderness. They can't successfully do that if there's all these roads. And we watched them go through a wilderness negotiation with the Dingle Act, which was passed in 2019, and the roads still became a negotiating point of what roads are going to be cherry stemmed to allow to be used, and there's all these like hacks that they do to create wilderness in areas that is not eligible because of the presence of roads. But the roads are the problem. That's why we have wilderness groups up in the Northern Rockies that have come up with all these like bonkers arguments that grizzly bears are threatened by roads. And they say that grizzly bears won't have sex because roads are in an area, and that the roads are a bigger threat to the grizzly bears than the entire destruction of their habitat even. And it's like, so then you start reading it like, well, show me more. Like I go look up YouTube and I can find 100 videos of grizzly bears walking down roads like they don't have a problem with roads at all. And what they will say, what you get into like the heart of where they say, well, 1/3 of all grizzly bear deaths happen within a certain distance from a road. So are the roads like animating themselves and killing these grizzly bears? No, it turns out poachers are using the roads to go in and hunt. So the problem is poaching, not roads. But everything is a way to launder roads out of a system so they can fulfill their purpose and agenda, which is to create wilderness. And so what SUA did back starting in the early 2000s is you had all these BLM offices go through their planning. This was the Bush administration created a bunch of plans they didn't like, which kicked into legal actions to challenge what they did. That all took 10 years to work its way through the courts, where we ended up with a big settlement in 2017, where we have to now go through all these travel plans for the next 10 years and reanalyze 10,000 miles of roads in Utah through a court-mandated settlement planning process. And the Labyrinth Rooms is just one of 13 areas that this is happening.
So there's still 12 more areas that this could be happening?
Completed. So Canyon Rims is an area south of Moab where they did close 40 miles of trails down there. We appealed that, and we lost on the appeal on that. But so those were already closures in this. And then the San Rafael Desert would cross the river from Gemini Bridges. So if you get to that Green River and you look across the river, you're looking at the San Rafael Desert. Usually you access it from Green River. And that's one that we have been litigating with SUA since they released the final plan during the Trump administration. And that's one where it's kind of its own story, but they started off thinking there were 300 roads that were actually managed, and the BLM inventoried what was there and found 1,200. The Trump administration decided to open 900. So SUA challenged that because they went from 300 to 900.
Okay.
And then there was an appeal process that we went through there with us, the state of Utah, and other entities. And eventually the court decided to let the BLM analyze 190 miles of those trails again. So we went through one more planning process again, and then they ended up closing 120 miles of
the 1,200 or 120 of the 300
of the 120 miles total. Like there was 900 that was left open, give or take 800. There's 120 miles of those. So we lost an incremental piece there through the settlement, and now we've appealed that. And so that's still not done. We're appealing that with the state of Utah currently. We're waiting to hear back on a ruling on our appeal. So that's kind of how we got here. I mean, this has been a process. It's taken 20 years, if not. We're in, but that's the operating system we're in. The Wilderness Act passed in 1967, and SUA is just an app on a phone executing a function of that operating system. And what we're learning at this is the process is broken. These processes have been totally weaponized. As soon as you get radical folks at the top of the agency, all bets are off as whether this process will be used reasonable and rational, or whether it'll be weaponized to enact a very radical political agenda that hurts the state of Utah, that hurts a huge swath of public land. And that's where we are. And it's probably time for, which is why I say outdoor recreation needs to recognize its interests, start acting its own size, and install a new operating, basically privileges our interests, where right now we've always been an afterthought. Outdoor recreation has no statutory protection to access public land. Ranchers do, miners do, the environmental groups have all kinds of statutes to give them legal standing, to give them seat at the table. Outdoor recreation's always kind of there. We talk about it a lot. A lot of outdoor recreation groups show up and participate and become partners in the process. All of that's based on the goodwill of the discretion of the decision makers. None of it's rooted in law.
Interesting.
And so where all the goodwill is in the public land system, if you didn't have outdoor recreation, the American people would look at this as just a socialist dumpster fire.
Right.
Because that's what it is. But because we allow public outdoor recreation access, the public looks at public land and says, this is something good. We like this. We benefit from this. And that's the danger zone of where all these agencies could overcorrect and cause there to be a public backlash. And I think this labyrinth plan,
I think we're going to hit it.
We're in that moment where we need to start seeing the backlash and for the people to start taking back some power over this system. And that's something we're definitely taking a very close look at and putting plans in place to try and change the whole operating system. Because trying to win these little app glitches, it doesn't make sense in the long run.
So how do you do that then moving forward? How do you instill a new operating system? What does the operating system even look like to begin with? Like what are we looking at with this fight ahead of
passing laws at the federal level that redefine how the public lands have to look at plans. And so we could talk a little bit about those, but before I get there, I need to talk about how do we actually correct the problem we're facing now, because it's nice to think big, but we actually have a think small problem now. And so, as I mentioned with the history on this,
I feel like as an industry, we have a very big thinking anything problem right now. Regardless of small or big.
Let's start thinking. That would be nice. And so, tactical level on this, Blue Ribbon Coalition will have to challenge this, and we expect it as much. We'll do that. That's just because you have to. It's part of the process. We learned that with the San Rafael Desert era. That you have to be, if you're not part of the post-decision appeal process, you're not really part of the process at all. And that's why we have our members do all the comment. Everyone says, well, we made all our comments and they didn't matter. And I'm like, well, yeah, you tried to influence somebody that is not an elected person. They don't have a there's no political accountability in position. So you're looking at your public comment as my public comment was supposed to influence this decision. It's not always what it's for. Sometimes it can, especially with something that's not as politically high profile as this Labyrinth Rims plan was. But with Labyrinth Rims, what you're doing is preserving the legal stand of Blue Ribbon Coalition and other organizations to go and make the claim that there was a damage and an injury. So it's really part of the legal process. You think you're doing something democratic, but what you're really doing is something legal. And so we see this always as we're in a legal process when these plans are. And so absolutely we will go the full legal distance. This isn't an exit. The decision on Labyrinth Rims, the final decision will be made by a judge, not by the field officer that signed her name on some administrative.
Gotcha. So the judge isn't looking at the merits of the decision. They're not looking at...
They could.
They could. Okay.
Yeah.
Mainly, they're just going to be looking at where all the dots, the I's dotted and T's crossed in this process.
Let's put it this way. You have to do all that stuff right, or it gets kicked out on technicalities.
Okay.
Once you get past the technical hurdles of administrative law, then they technically should and will be looking at the whether this was a good decision, whether the BLM followed their rules and the things they're supposed to do.
Okay.
And so that's the case that will be made by us and Utah and others. And SUA will probably come in as an intervener on this one and do their own legal arguments. And so that is the process.
Okay.
And it would be negligent for us as an industry to not have a capable, well-funded player that's there to be part of that process.
It'd be super negligent. It'd be super
And so
terrible.
we're there. We're the ones doing it. We have standing. There's a group called Colorado TPA, Trails Preservation Alliance. There's a dirt bike course in Colorado, and another one called Ride with Respect in Moab, run by Cliff Kuhn. We've kind of all been the nonprofits and running traps on this travel management planning in Utah. And so we're glad to have those allies. They do help, and they need, and we always say, like I said, support friends. Like, we want the whole ecosystem to be thriving.
Yes.
We need our support to do our work, but the industry support everyone stepping is important. It's part of the process. These trails open as much as we possibly. And if we weren't there, we would have. I think they would have 400. Yeah. Like, why wouldn't they?
Totally.
Like they would have had no resistance. So everyone, and so I get it. You get a lot of people who are discouraged. They say, like, it seems like we just been losing. There is some truth to that. There's evidence, but there's also truth to the fact that we're not losing nearly as much as we would be if groups like ours weren't in there involved. And then if we were involved in these fights with even more funding and more resources and more staff and more personnel, more lawyers, we've never even taken the chance to see what that would look like. So maybe we should try it.
Yeah. We don't have the funding to do that. We're always, I think you said it.
But we do.
I mean, the potential is there for the funding, right? But you said earlier, I don't know if we were recording at the time yet or not, but you're like, we're just trying to get the appeals in. That's what our funding, our budget looks like right now. We can't even look at trying to change narratives or trying to get offensive or trying to change election results or lobbying. We can't look at any of that because we're just trying to make sure we have enough money to get the appeals paperwork in.
Yeah, that's not quite what I said. I mean, but that is similar. True. There is some truth to the fact that budget-wise, compared to like the Sierra Club or SUA or these other groups, we have to get the main things right. And I think we punch above our weight on all of it, on the appeals, on the legal work, on what, I mean, as a nonprofit, we can a small amount of lobbying that we have to report to the IRS and all of that, but we can do that. And we do. And I think we're very good at it. And, but at some point you just need to have a separate entity engaging in that's the purpose.
Yeah.
And so, and the changing the narrative and all those things, I mean, I'm here talking to you because I'm trying to do that.
Absolutely.
And these are the channels, are like the podcasts, the social media channels, the influencers, like we do have an outsized presence on a lot of these media platforms.
Yep.
And if we could amplify what I'm saying, and it's hard because this stuff, I mean, we're in this 45 minutes and there's a lot still to talk about. But it's important. And I try to be, I know what I'm talking about. I do this professionally. To translate me down to the level that anybody even cares to listen to it, I don't know how possible that is, but people have to make some investment of time and intellectual energy, figuring out where you stand on this, becoming part of it. An analogy I use is the Second Amendment. There was probably a period of time in America just go buying. I'm just buying to go hunting and to be
or for my ranch or
live in the American landscape and to defend my family and whatever.
It's like another hammer at that point.
At some point in our history, that shifted to where once you were buying that gun, you were buying a position and a political identity and a political right.
Yes.
And it was probably inconvenient to the people at the time who thought that was unnecessary. And why can't I just
have a tool? Why don't I exercise take a political position? That kind of thing.
And so if you own a vehicle that you use to outdoor recreate of any kind, do not scapegoat the side-by-sides of this.
Yeah.
If you have a internal combustion engine or battery-powered engine or whatever that you use to go out and recreate in public land, I don't care if it's to get you to a hiking trailhead or to go camp for a week on a remote camp spot or to go rip it up on a sand dune somewhere, you bought a political identity that you are probably not investing any time or protecting.
Probably.
Time to change your mind about it.
Yeah.
Because there are groups, we've seen this Moab plan more than anything there are well-funded, well-lawyered groups who will just take that away from you off of lies and stupid argument so that you can't enjoy that anymore, even though you're not hurting a single thing.
Yeah.
And if you don't step up and stand up for yourself and do that through supporting people like me who are taking that support and concentrating that into some high level action, then get used to reserved campground. Get used to a completely managed experience where you're getting in line like you're at Disneyland, at Angel's Landing, at Zion National Park. That's the end goal of SUA. They released a report which was, how do we create a new vision for recreation? And you flip through their report and every picture is a mom hiking with her kid. A tent on a rock. There's not a single motorized vehicle in the whole report.
Yeah.
You're the target. It is not the side-by-side's the distraction.
Yes.
Everybody else is the target.
Yep.
And if you don't see yourself as that, then you better find something else to do with your free time and other places to go. I mean, there's huge public health benefits and personal benefits that come from outdoor recreation on public land. We don't do enough to recognize that.
Yep.
If that's why you do it, there's people that just want to take that away from you because they're a dogmatic belief in a political ideology that they're going to put their time, money, and everything.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy. I mean, you look at the other side, the people who want wilderness areas, right? Quote unquote. They think they want wilderness. They are very, very good at shopping at places and doing research about saying, okay, I'm going to go shop at REI because I know they donate funds to Sierra Club. I'm going to go shop at this place because I know they donate funds to SUA. I'm going to go shop at this place, whatever it is. They do a good job at noticing and taking act on that. Yeah. But I've noticed in the past a decade or so, off-roaders have started getting more into, well, I'm not going to shop at REI because they donate to Sierra Club. I'm not going to shop at this place because they donate to SUA. But I don't think we've taken a step into, as a consumer group, saying, I am going to shop at this place because they donate to Blue Ribbon Coalition, or pushing the places they like to shop at, Polaris, Can-Am, these big powerhouses in the industry, and saying, I'm not going to buy a Polaris or Can-Am anymore. I'm going to go get something else because you guys aren't donating to the fight. You're not taking a stance anymore. And by you not taking a stance, shit like this happened.
Yeah, and that's a fair point. And it's something that we have to navigate carefully at BRC because I want everybody's support. My door is like wide open. If you're an industry player in this and you care about wanting to get in this fight, reach out to me. We will have a conversation on what role you can play. Sometimes that could just be a financial contribution. That'd be great. So
buy a guidebook, buy a membership,
guidebook, like help. And so, but you guys that's part of why we offered sponsors to the guidebook so that companies like yours, Morphley, could showcase you're willing to support these fights.
Yes.
And so as part of our plan to push back on Labyrinth, I mean, we kind of do this already. We publish on our website, supports us. We're going to be making efforts to very transparent. Here is who supports.
Okay.
And our plan is to probably have every Friday we update this, put it out online and say, these are the companies that are with us in this fight. If your favorite off-road company is not here, tag them. Let's talk to them. I don't want to bully them.
Yeah.
Because there's some people who will tell me don't put that list, not because they'll still support us, but they just don't want the public recognition.
Got it.
And that's fair. That's like a 501c3 doesn't have to disclose its donors. Supreme Court cases about this where you can donate to a C3 and not have it be politicized.
Okay.
And so, but some people want to be seen as recognized as fighting for this. That should be a deciding factor.
Yeah.
When I bought my side-by-side, I chose a dealer that I knew helps with these fights. I knew I did all my research on what machine and thing I wanted, but when it came time to which business am I going to support, that was the final decision factor. What role do they play in these fights?
Yeah.
And everybody's going to decide they want a tire and flame of some kind, right? They're going to go research the capability, and everyone's going to do that research and kind of land on a range of products that do a good job. And there's a lot of great companies servicing this market in this country. It should be part of your decision-making matrix of do they support the legal fights, which I have to distinguish because we've given a lot of cover to businesses that if they just go support the trail maintenance projects, they're supporting the fight. And I support those. We
do need those. Those are...
It is a perfectly fine part of the ecosystem of trail advocacy to have it's probably one of our biggest strengths. Have these very engaged volunteer groups that go out and take care of and steward the public land, help maintain what's going on out there, mitigate the impacts. I will not say for a second to not continue supporting that, as long as the legal lawyer lobbying, all of that is also aggressively.
Yes.
Because what we saw in Moab, and this is, people will hear me say this a lot, is we showed up to a lawyer fight with a trailhead key.
Yeah.
And we got our butts kicked.
Yeah.
Hard.
How much money do you think has been spent on trail maintenance projects, cleaning up trailheads, putting up kiosks that help outline the trail, where to stay on the trail, don't go off,
in Moab,
pick up your trash, don't leave white flowers?
I do not have the number yet. It is something we will be submitting a FOIA request for.
Oh, cool. Okay.
We want to find that out.
Yeah.
Of how much time and effort and volunteer money and donated money and all of this has gone into new trails that just got closed.
Uh-huh.
We know already there were some.
Yeah.
And we want to know that number.
Yeah.
But I know for a fact that a lot of those dirt bike routes were maintained by dirt bike groups that were doing that work. And my guess is that we funneled into this Moab area to show goodwill and to build goodwill with the agencies. And that's the other argument is like, oh, if we do these stewardship projects and we become friends with these agency decision makers. And that's probably true. Mm-hmm. I know Nicole Gaddis Wyatt that signed this decision. I think in her heart of hearts, I don't think she would have picked this one. I think she got top-down direction from Washington, D.C. to do exactly what she did. Uh-huh. So you go become friends with people who aren't autonomous actors in the system. Yeah. And then and that's fine. We want to be friends with them, but they're operating in a system that has terrible incentives and that vastly empowers very radical people that can occupy the top positions in these agencies. Mm-hmm. And so to be putting all of our eggs in this basket and to say unequivocally that if I go do a trail maintenance project, I've saved the trail. Yeah. That did not even factor into the decision that the BLM made on these trails that they closed. If anything, I hear that a lot of the reasoning of the BLM closing some of these trails is that they were almost, their reasoning wasn't that it was too well taken care of. Their reason was that they weren't being used enough. That happens with a lot of these. They say they're reclaiming and they're not being used enough. And that's why we created the Lost Trails Guidebook to educate people about some of those trails. And we're doing too good of a trail maintenance job as a user group that these trails look like they're not being used, and they're using that to shut us down. Like this has been a huge, I think, eye opener to show that ultimately what needs to be done is legal work, lobbying, and focusing election. Yeah, and that media, needs to be a media. And user engagement. So let me talk about I'm working on the plan right now, and some of it's the reason I have it. People are probably wondering, it's like last week was like the biggest I've ever seen our feed in 2 years, which is good. That's a good thing. We want the attention. Yeah. We have a lot of donations coming in, a lot of people ordering guidebooks, becoming members. We hope that continues. We really need the support. We're grateful for everybody. Then you looked at our social media feeds and it was a little quiet. It's like I was processing a lot. I've been on the phone nonstop with all my contacts in this space and trying to figure out what are the next moves here. Yeah. And we're working on a strategy document of what will be like the 5-point plan. And I'm writing it now so we can put that outline, get people rallying behind this approach of how do we fight back on this. Okay. But it's prepared enough that we can talk about it. And so step one is the litigation. Yeah. We have to do it. The process, we have to be there. BRC is one of the 3 nonprofit groups that's best positioned to be there. We have great allies. Patrick McKay with Colorado Offroad Trail Defenders has been hugely helpful in like putting maps out, educate people about this area. His comment was probably the most substantive and best committed for this plan. They ignored all of his. Wow. And he is just an awesome fighter and warrior. And so we'll be making sure that everybody that played a strong role has a role to play in the litigation in some kind, whether it's informing it or just using their information and their feedback, and so that we have a really strong case on. And we'll do that. There will be an administrative appeal that takes place now. A lot of people out there asking, well, when will this close? Can I ride these trails now? So the answer to that, because people are asking, is 30 days from when the decision sign is when it goes. Okay. A group like Blue Ribbon Coalition or the state of Utah can file a notice of appeal and do a petition to stay. If we do a petition to stay until the IBLA rules on that petition to stay, the decision is not in it. Okay. They likely will rule to deny the petition to stay. That the administrative appeal process is basically an administrative law judge. The judge is an employee of the executive branch of the government, deciding if the executive branch of the government made the right decision, and they almost always decide that the executive branch of the government made the right decision.
It's not a third party that gets to look and have a check and balance.
No, this is all about checking off the administrative boxes of a process. And
Gotcha.
So if I were to go to federal court tomorrow and say, we don't like this plan, we're suing, they would say, well, the administrative appeal window didn't file an appeal, so you didn't exhaust your administrative remedies, and so you're not there's a jurisdictional problem. We're dismissing this case off of jurisdictional grounds that you had. Okay. And so you don't get access to the judiciary branch, the judicial branch of the government until you've done all the steps with the executive branch. Okay. And so that's why there has to be an administrative appeal, just so that we can keep the options for a federal appeal. And that's the game SUA plays when they get plans they don't like. That's the play now. And so that's legal. That costs money. That's lawyers. Yep. We need people donating to support that, and we're prepared to do it. But there's a lot of other legal things that could go on in that process of discovery, where we're getting a record, we're FOIA requests, we're trying to know more about what decision. The more resources I have to do that, the more of that I'm going to. Okay. And so we like to just get the basic steps of the process done. That's going to happen. To do all these other things that possibly open up other opportunities and expose different risks within the agency, that we will.
Depends on resources.
I would love the resources. Yeah. And so litigation will happen. I expect I've seen comments from folks I know in the state of Utah on social media saying that this will get the governor or people in his high level, like the political office. I haven't seen a crowd. I think Utah come out hard against this. Good. Okay. So litigation, step one. Okay. Step two is Congress. This mess in Labyrinth was really Congress. Really? So in 2019, they passed the Dingle Act and created the Labyrinth wilderness area on the other side of the. Okay. And that was a result of multiple rounds of negotiation with SUA, the environmental Congressman Curtis and Senator Mitt Romney and the governor and everybody in Utah. And there was a lot of folks that really liked that. I was working for Mike Lee's office at the time, and we were trying to stop it because we thought it was a bad deal. We thought they were negotiating with people who were negotiating in bad faith and that they were going to get burned. And I remember commenting with folks like Kelsey Berg from Mitt Romney's office, Scott with me on Facebook, and was like, we rolled SUA. We got everything we wanted, and they got screwed in this process. And I'm like, okay, I guess we'll see how this plays out.
Let them get in the process, though.
And so we designate these wilderness areas, and the things they put in this bill that they thought would stop them was they codified that there should be no buffer zones. And so that wilderness ends a riverbank. It doesn't extend into the river, but then they designated the river itself a wild and scenic river. And the public hears, oh, wild and scenic river, the river's protected. But what they don't understand is there's actually administrative designations. And so there's a part of that river that's wild. And that's the part that comes out of Desolation Canyon, north of Green River. Okay. And that's managed like, then you have a part that's called a recreation designation portion of the river. And that's from Desolation Canyon down to the mouth of Labyrinth. Okay. And then they have this designation called Scenic, which is Labyrinth, which doesn't have the restrictions of the equivalent of a wilderness designation, but they use the terms loosely, and the public thinks, oh, that is a wild designation. We protect the wilderness experience of these flat water paddlers because Congress did this thing. And that's not what they did. They designated it a scenic river, which means the scenic values of that river should be enjoyed by all the user groups in that area, not just the folks actually on the river. And so this plan contradicts that. They cut off the scenic overlooks and viewpoints of that river to all the other users except the ones on the river themselves. Wow. And so, and then if you look at some of the other plans that have been going on here where they were trying to implement the Dingle Act, you had Grand County commenting saying, oh, we need buffer zones on the other side of the river to protect the wilderness experience of these people. And they're actually, like, Congress said no buffer zones. That's the law. Yeah. That is what the statute says. And then you have, I can read you today, the Salt Lake Tribune article I was quoted in with SUA as well. We were both interviewed by the reporter in the Deseret News. And she says this completes the process of protecting this area. And so I wanted to send a note to this reporter and say, thank you for putting SUA on record for admitting that what they're doing is expressly contradicting the Dingle Act. Yes. And the creation of this wilderness area. And so that's what they did. And they used the administrative process to do it. We'll have to find out through court what teeth the Dingle Act has. And we'll find out. Congress or Curtis and Romney both thought they were doing something really effective there. I don't know how effective it'll be. It's left to us to find that out. But if I were them, I'd feel really betrayed. Yeah. That I had struck this careful balance to try and contain the impact of this bill to just one county and not Grand County. So it's only supposed to impact Emory County. Oh, interesting. Okay. And if I were them, I would start putting on the table that we should repeal these wildernesses because the deal has been not upheld.
Yeah.
The understanding was that the wilderness groups wouldn't go and try and use this to justify the creation of more areas that are managed like wilderness, even though they're not designated like wilderness. That was the spirit of this. That's why those passages got codified into this. So they didn't uphold the deal. I hope this means they'll never look at that group again and say, that's someone we can negotiate with in good faith, because they've proven to you they cannot.
They cannot, 100%. Yeah.
And I would say, if I was in Congress, I would basically be introducing legislation tomorrow to repeal those wilderness designations because they're not upholding their own.
Yeah.
And everyone thinks a wilderness designation is like this permanent thing, but it's not. It's something Congress creates. Congress can uncreate it in the same process.
Yeah.
And so maybe we shouldn't have these wilderness areas if the wilderness groups are going to use them as an excuse to launder wilderness into other areas that are necessary. Yeah. The other thing we want Congress to do, and we've gotten some initial signals of support that this will work. We saw the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument Plan come out a few weeks ago, and it's not final. It's still in the drafting. They're taking public comment, and so people can go to Blue Ribbon Coalition's website and comment on this.
Okay.
It is terrible. When I saw this plan, I was like, we're going to get screwed in Moab. The second I saw what they were doing here, I'm like, if this is as aggressive and radical as this administration is being, we're going to get something like Alternative B, which was the SUA alternative. Turned out to be right. Because the staircase plan is so bad. There's one version of that where it's like they keep 7 and 2 million acres. This is this area the size of Delaware, and they're keeping 7 roads open.
Oh my God. Wow. I didn't realize it was that big.
It's bad.
I wonder if they throw in this super, super extreme option so that they can go with option C.
Yeah, let's do it. It's called the Delphi technique. Of course, that's what they do. And that's what we thought they would do here. But then they still went with pretty much the extreme option.
Yeah.
And so that's my point, is that you have these extreme people heading these agencies. They're weaponizing the NEPA process to basically enact the 30 by 30 agenda that the Joe Biden signed it into. There's no statutory basis for this. There's no law passed by Congress that says 30 by 30 is the law of the land. The agency the environmental groups dreamed that up as a marketing campaign.
I don't think
the administration came out and said, that's our policy. They have no legal basis for it. So they don't have the law on their side. And so they're weaponizing all these plans, travel plans, resource management plans, forest management plans to enact the 30 by 30 agenda that they otherwise have no codified statute to back them up. So if I'm Congress, this is an executive branch just blindly robbing you of your power that you're elected there to represent me to wield, not to let them run away with.
I don't think a lot of our listeners know anything about the 30 by 30. I've talked with quite a few off-roaders saying, have you heard about the 30 by 30? And they're like, no, what is that? So just in quick, because I think the 30 by 30 could be an entire episode by itself.
Oh, it could. It's easy. And in a sentence, it's a plan to lock up 30% of the lands and waters of this country for what they call protection or
wilderness
conservation.
protection.
And we don't quite know what that means, so then we don't quite know how to count what counts. I was at a conference last week in Texas about stopping the 30 by 30 agenda, and the farmers, the people in the middle of the country are very alarmed about this because there's a part of this that's targeting private property rights through conservation and things. There's a lot more that goes into it. But on public land, they're using these national monument designation, planning processes, and other things like that to lock up and restrict public access and impact on any land they can to complete this.
By 2030 is the goal. That's what 30% of the lands by 2030.
By 2030.
And then they
have
quickly to go through and try and push all this through.
Yeah, that's why they're ramming it through. And then they have 50 by 50 too. They want to do 50% by 2050. What? And so that's what I'm telling you. Like, if we don't change the operating system, that's the logical course that's
where we're heading. Yeah.
And so
that's crazy.
Anyway, so back to the monument plan, we knew it was bad, and Congress defunded that planning process, which was smart because there are signs up right now on Hole in the Rock Road that the county is basically saying, we don't have the resources to maintain this because the monument managers will not let us.
Okay.
They can't get permission from the monument managers of the BLM to maintain their county road. And so they say, travel at your own risk. This is an unmaintained road because the monument won't let us.
Yeah.
So there's no resources going into actually managing
which is crazy. I mean,
you look at the list of how many people.
That's crazy.
If you look at the list of the people who are developing this plan to close it all down to 7 roads, it's 2 pages long, 10 font size font, and it fills up 2 whole tables of people. There's 70 people working on this plan full time, and so that they can close it all down. and there's nobody that can go out there and run a bulldozer over this road because these land management agencies aren't people out in the field on the ground managing a landscape. It's a bunch of people in cubicles writing plans to make it so that you can't go out there.
Wow.
And so it's logical for Congress to look at this and say, this is not working. This is a process that's being weaponized beyond the intent that any of us had in mind for this. And they've introduced legislation that defund that process. The BLM in the Knapp Field office, if this law goes into effect, and Congress has its own problems to work out with how it passes spending bills. And so my understanding is this hasn't been passed into law yet, but it's passed the House.
Okay.
It is possible that this becomes the law.
Yeah.
And if it were, then they couldn't use any of their budget to develop these plans any further. They'd be put on hold. They'd have to go on the shelf. They could not legally use money to develop this.
Okay.
I think the same strategy needs to happen with these travel plans because they're being used.
Yeah.
If there's a justification to do it in the Grand Staircase Resource Management, there's certainly justification to pull all the funding out of this Moab Field office that has anything to do with developing, implementing, enforcing anything.
Yeah.
This travel plan. And that's something that I think can get the Utah delegation behind. We're working on them. Others are working on them. That seems like something that would be immediate. It would be like the equivalent of a court injunction that Congress could do. In the spending bill, they have to pass in 45 days from now. And so there's a window and there's a vehicle they could put. If they went and used political capital to fight for this, that's a possibility. So we'll have an action alert on our website where you can contact your member of Congress and tell them to support this option of doing everything you can to stop this plan. And if you live in an area, like if you're in southern Wyoming right now, you should customize your comment to say, and also do it for this resource management plan they're developing in southern Wyoming, because it's just as bad.
Oh, wow.
And so there's a lot of these that are going on all over, and following BRC, you'll know what a lot of these are. But at the very least, we need Congress to start thinking about using the power of the purse to make sure that these administrative processes aren't getting weaponized by the radical folks that are running the agency.
The departments. Yeah.
And
explain a little bit. I think a lot of off-roaders, we lump together a lot of government agencies into one government agency, right? So we've got the state of Utah in this case. We've got BLM. We've got different counties involved. State parks, obviously, state of Utah. The BLM, what are they under? They're federal or?
Yeah, they're a federal agency, the Department of the Interior. And so the Department of Interior is run by a presidential cabinet, as Deb Haaland, and that's the Secretary of the Interior. And the BLM has head of them, the director of that's Tracy Stone. And they kind of are if something's coming from Washington, kind of coming from there. And the BLM is ideally structured that you have these field managers and do their makings on a local level, but they will get direct from Washington from time to time. Completely Washington travel plan. The Moab travel plan is too high stakes.
Oh, they have to have.
They had to have their hands in it, although it was signed by a field manager. And so that's who actually made the decision.
Okay.
They're required by law to coordinate with, and so you have some state government. Grand County did support the restricted version of this because Grand County had elected the folks that were sympathetic to that viewpoint
at the time,
some of those have lost their seats. And so we'll see how the politics of Grand County evolve over time. But then you have the state of Utah, which usually PLPCO is the office we have in Utah. It's a public land policy coordinating office that operates at the pleasure of the governor, and they represent. And in Utah, it's interesting because if you have like a county road and a county votes abandon a road and close it, it has the authority to do that, but it can only state also. So state and county, like the jurisdiction split 50. So neither entity take a unilateral decision on the road. And the state of Utah for years now has been very, very, very protective of its interests in roads. And so the default operating system within the state of Utah is we want all of those roads as possible.
Infrastructure.
It's clear to us that our state economy, a huge chunk of the state economy comes from outdoor recreation, especially motorized outdoor recreation. We're one of the global destinations for this. And so the state has a huge interest in that recreation economy thriving. A lot of these roads provide access for mining exploration. They provide access for range improvements, agricultural and cattle grazing and sheep grazing. And so you have agricultural interests that are invested in that. And so the state has this broad vision of all of its and that it wants to protect and that to basically adopt it, especially ours 247.
Oh, yeah.
And so when we look at the landscape of who are the governments involved in this decision, you have this pocket of kind of people at the BLM that I think are abusing their power and just ramming it through that doesn't have popular. And then you have a county that is in political flux. But there are certainly people. There is a dominant faction there that is controlling the position that supports the restrictions. But then you back up and say, okay, but that's 5,000 people that live in the state that they're representing in an area that's getting millions of visitors a year. That's impacting the broader state economy. So the state interest in Moab is probably as big or larger than just the county's interest.
Yeah.
And then you have San Juan County, that some of these roads cross the border into San Juan County, and a lot of those got closed. And we know San Juan County, what happened there.
Okay.
And so and then you have SITLA, which are state institutional trust lands, which are the blue sections you see on the maps, where those are there to fund our school. And they have a legal right to have access to all their parcels. You close a road to a SITLA parcel, there's a strong legal precedent and make sure those roads stay open.
You still have access to the parcel. Yeah.
So there's a lot of SITLA land in this area. And so all those groups kind of have an interest in what happened. You have ranchers. I've met a mining claim. I was out there once. We have a lot of small climb out there. And then you have all the different recreation user groups, and most of them probably align with the BRC. You probably get some variance when you get into dispersed camping crowd. You get kind of to support their own interest and misled by false narratives. The bikers are actually pretty good at protecting their own interests and everybody else. But I bike and I like doing it, but I don't care if other people are out there, but I certainly see the discussions that happen. And then you have the group that was probably the most toxic rafter and the paddlers that felt like they should have the whole area to themselves, and they kind of got used by the wilderness groups, probably because they're kind of a lot of the same people, into saying this was bringing balance. Now we can finally enjoy the river without all these other people there. And they have no legal basis for that position.
I did whitewater rafting for 5-6 years. I was a guide in California. And when you're on the river, you're not seeing very many people. There's not many other things going on around you while you're focusing on whitewater rapids and floating.
Well, this
on the
isn't
river
whitewater part. This is actually what they call flat water. But but their position, like if they're saying there's user conflict here, I'm like, there can't possibly be. You're out in the middle of the river. I can't get into a conflict with you if I'm in a vehicle. I would sink and I would be underwater. And
how big is your snorkel though?
Don't have one, but even then, the Green River is pretty deep. And so, but they're saying that the conflict is they don't want to even see another user or hear another user.
I'm sorry, you live in a society. There's people around. You can't get away from people.
And so that's the position that the BLM there's no legal base for it. There's nothing that says river rafters have a right to river raft and not see another person, but that's the basis the BLM made the decision to close all these trails around the river.
Wow.
And they'll say, but it was also damaging riparian resources and all this stuff. Like, good, then close the boat ramp to Mineral Bottom. Because that's a big parking lot with a bathroom right next to it. That's got to be impacting some riparian resources, but they didn't do that. And back to the economic data, they're saying we're only going to lose, only 7,000 people will stop coming to this area. You spread 7,000 people out of over 365 days and over 1,000 miles of routes. How did closing this route mitigate any environmental impact if it's only 7,000 people? So either your economic data is wildly wrong, or your claim that you're getting environmental benefit out of restricting access to 7,000 people over 365 days across 300,000 acres of land is wildly overstated and misguided. And I think it's both. I think they got both of those things wrong. And so anyway, so that's the political landscape. And so people who look at this and feel like it's hopeless, it's like you had 2 federal unelected people make a decision, or maybe 3, like a decision maker at BLM and then the folks in Washington pulling this. There are counties, there's a state government, there are congressional seats. There's a lot of, the genius of the American government system is that there are a lot of levers of power. We have separation of power. We have balances of power. There's a judicial branch of government. We seek redress of grievances. We can hold people politically accountable through elections. And despite the most ardent beliefs of the wilderness, there's no such permanent land use. Our land policy has shifted at least 5 major times since we've been founded as a country, and it shifts in cycles. We are at the end of one of those cycles, and it is going to shift again. I think it shifts to prioritize outdoor recreation and alternative energy. Those will be the centers of gravity. A new system, and the wilderness movement will still be with us, but they won't be of gravity. This is their last. I see it as their last gasp. If these overcorrections where they're abusing their power to galvanizing fights where these other interest groups that are positioned to take over the throne, actually. And that's part of that's the strategy I have. It's what I'm shooting for with this is if the outdoor recreation can rally behind a common vision and cause here, we can go win back everything.
Yeah.
And so that's what I call kind of part 2 of this plan, is there has to be some political movement. Blue Ribbon Coalition, I mean, we're a C3. I'm not going to go tell you who you need to be involved in the political process. It's fair to say. But you should start thinking about how your people always ask that question. Step 3 is the ingredients are all there. And so on our plan, the page that we'll publish that has our plan, we'll have a form where if you are on Instagram, manage a Facebook, you have a podcast, if you're on LinkedIn, if you're on TikTok, like we want to know where you are. We'll put everybody into like a email list or some sort of form where we can contact you as influencers in the space. And we don't care what your follower count is. And we know we have people that have a few hundred people but are hugely influential, and people who have millions who are influential in that. Yeah. But what we need is to make sure that the narrative is correct, because SUA wins here because they peddle lies that people start to believe because they say them often enough and loudly enough that it just becomes, that's the truth. Yep. That's what you hear. Yep. We have to start doing that ourselves. And so that's our goal with that, is that we will at least share with you real information. Like we've been on the ground, we've seen these trails, we've read the hundreds of pages of plans. We will correct the truth about the narrative and make sure that we aren't perpetuating the false narratives that are hurting us. And any influencer who wants to help us be part of that controlling the narrative project needs to start happening. Yeah. And so we invite people, if you're interested at all in your platform and your voice, the truth gets out about what happened with this plan and what we can do to fix it. We need. Yeah. So that's step 3. Yeah. Step 4 is to pressure the industry. And that's the plan I told you, where we'll make transparent who's supporting us that wants to be published out that. So you can go look and I'm not going to go beg companies to support us.
I think the consumers need that.
I don't want to go threaten them into supporting us, but you're their customers. You have the relationship. As long as you know whether or not they are supporting us, you can go have that conversation and say, hey, why aren't you using your business as a platform to support this fight? Because if we lose this fight, your business doesn't exist.
Yeah, 100%.
And send them our way. We will talk to everybody that knocks on that door.
I just hit my phone.
Okay.
National alert system testing.
That is the national. Somebody hacked the national alert system to make sure that point I just made got really strongly emphasized.
That was great timing.
That's really important. We want the industry to be part of us, but we want them to come in through an open door, that this is something they believe in their hearts they want to help with, not because they feel like they have
bullied into it kind of thing.
And we've worked hard to try and make there be a value for I think one of the things I would love to do, everybody wanting to support and being like a sponsor of our Lost Trails Guide. We're going to keep producing more of those because they're an effective way to educate the community about what's going on and people like them. We'll showcase you on our news. We'll put you on this list in our blog. We would, if we had it, we would put together a membership program where we can give discounts and benefits and things to your business, to our members, and make sure that our membership base, as it grows, becomes your customer base, and we're building that all together. We're open to any of it, all of that. Yeah. And there are a ton of businesses out there that do support us, and I don't mean to they are awesome. We wouldn't be here without that support already, and we're in this fight, and we're in it strong because of that. But there's a lot more to do. Go look at the bottom line. The Sierra Club operates at $1 million balance, and I think we could manage.
I think from a $900 billion industry, $200 million is nothing.
It's nothing.
It's nothing.
And a lot of that will come from just the users too. We have a huge membership base, and we have all these clubs and organizations. Like, all the pieces are there to have a fully organized and coordinated movement. We haven't done as good a job as we to galvanize people around a fight like this one, and that's why I'm here talking to you today. Develop this plan so people can be part of it, and that we can be a strong, organized force. We can be. And so I feel like we're doing everything we can to rise to that challenge. It's a challenge. There's a lot more to go on this road, but it's a cool road, and we hope there's a really cool view at the end of it.
Hopefully, that doesn't get shut down.
And so the fifth thing, and this is the other one I want to talk about, is we do want everybody to buy the latest volume 2 of the Lost Trails Guidebook, because it has multiple trails that are out there that could be closed. And we want you to go use them. Read the introduction of the guidebook. I'm not even going to spoil it. Just go read it. Okay. But the moral of the story is we want you to go fall in love with these things that you're going to lose, because then you will be motivated to fight to get them. And so you have a small window, and this is this high season to go visit Moab. The weather's great. A great time to be there. if you have a trip planned to Moab or you want to get out there, get your hands on a guidebook, and go explore some of these trails. It's an hour detour on some of them from some of the main trails you might also want to go hit.
Yep.
Go see what we're losing so you can
appreciate what we're
not
losing.
just appreciate, but we're partnering with UPLA, Utah Public Lands Alliance.
Okay.
They do a lot of work down here at Sand Hollow and throughout the state of Utah. They're doing a fundraiser for us where they've committed to match up to help fund the legal fights and everything that needs to be done here. But I've worked with them. They've developed a website where you can actually go on just a jot form, and if you traveled one of these trails, share pictures, share your experience of what you and all of that we would use as potentially for affidavit. You generally don't need more than a handful of those, but if there was one that you were, I mean, we know there's a lot of folks in our community that do motorized recreation because they have some disability or and we care a lot about that we don't want to see that lost. So if you feel like you have a really compelling story as to why losing that stick route was, those are the kinds of things where you could actually play a role in the legal fight just by going out and doing what we love, which is exploring these trails and exploring public land. So that's the fifth thing is we want you to be an activist explorer. We want you to go explore the things that we're losing so that I learned early on when I got into public land that, and this is the make the agency, you don't understand it until you get on the ground. If you didn't get on the ground and I just told you side-by-sides are ripping that place up, every public narrative out there would lead you to the default position of that must be true. Because there's enough areas where there is a lot of concentrated side-by-side use where you would say, yeah, if that's happening everywhere, it's a problem. But what happens in Sand Hollow, where it's an open area, OHV area, and that's allowable, is very different than what's happening with rims. And it shocked me that I literally only saw less than 5.
Wow.
In weeks of time and thousands of miles. They are not there. That's not the impact.
That's not where they're going. Yeah.
And you would not know the truth of that if you hadn't been out there, and the BLM doesn't track or record any data on that. We know that the apps do. We know Onyx probably has user data on this. We know Trails Offroad does, and Trails Offroad is a mapping partner with us on the Lost Trails Guidebook too, and they'll be documenting within their app the status of these trails so you know what they are and what their condition is, especially if they get formally closed. We want people to know what's happening there so no one's out there breaking the law. But they want to be a part of that. And we need academics. If you have an academic background, want to do studies on this, I bet I could get Trails Off-Road to anonymize your data and make that available to you so that you could then
go through and do the analytics on it all?
So that we could document the user use out here and base decisions off of real data. And there's a lot we can do as what I call the activist explorers, where we are out there using our experiences on the ground to be part of that is the real story of what's happening. And if we're not filling the vacuum of what's actually happening there with what's actually happening, the environmentalists will fill that vacuum with their agenda.
With whatever they want.
And the lies. And so we need you out there so that you can testify of what's really happening. And I know what I've seen, and I didn't see garbage. I didn't see trail dam. I didn't see concentrated use or user groups anywhere. I saw a bunch of people. I saw a couple out there on a campground that they've come to for years. I went and intruded on their camp and said, hey, they're going to close your site. And there's like, what? They almost cried. They were so upset that they were going to close the site they've been coming to for years, and they did close it.
No shit. Oh, I heard about that when you went and talked to them. So, and
I talked to another group. It was a group of women on mountain bikes, and I said, your site is on the risk to be closed. They actually left this one open. And they said, whoa, have you worked with SUA to keep this open? I'm like,
SUA's the one closing it.
I have some bad news about your friends at SUA.
Wow.
That's who's wanting to actually close it. And they're like, SUA? No. I'm like, yeah.
Yes.
100%.
That's what you don't understand.
And so I do, when I'm out there, I go talk to people. Just I want to let them know what's happening. Respectful about it. I know you're out there to get away from me. I appreciate that. I make it quick, and everyone's always actually really grateful that I talk to them and let them know what's going on, because they just don't know. And that's why I want people informed what's going on and you involved. We need your help. You sign up and become a member of BRC. You'll get a newsletter every week, because this is Moab is bad. What happened in Moab is bad. It is happening, and we all need to have each other's, because the same story that's happening in Moab is going to happen in Idaho. Arizona's on the list. Your backyard's on the list.
Yep.
You are the target. I don't care what user group you are.
50% of the
You're the target of this.
Gone.
They do not want you out there. They want you on a reservation sim getting in line to go hike your reservation, get hiked to Hills Landing on a shuttle bus and go back to your hotel in the city. That is the outdoor experience they want you. So if you want anything besides the primitive outdoor, what we would call the wilderness experience, but not guaranteed by a legal wilderness designation, that's on the hit list. That is the target. If you don't get involved, that will be the future of public land recreation. And so we want support. We have 5 meaningful things you can do to help influence this plan. It's going to take all of government approach. It's going to all of our community approach, and it's going to take time.
Yep.
And we're in it for the long term. We've been in it since 1987. We'll keep doing it as long as we have the support to keep going.
So the 5 things that people can kind of keep in mind that they can help with are litigation, and that usually just comes down to funding for litigation.
Yep.
Congress, so influencing your election results.
And Congress, and I would say if you live in Utah, your state government needs to be hearing from you. Okay. And if you live in San Juan County, make sure your county is get involved in this. I mean, you guys go, it's better for us. I mean,
legislative branch.
The amount of lobbying we do at Blue Ribbon Coalition is actually pretty limited because we don't have to, because our community will do it if they know it.
Yeah.
And if these elected officials hear from you, I think they'll act on it.
Okay.
And so go carry the weight on this. You call them, build a relationship with your member of Congress to make sure they're taking full action on this, and hit all your limit, hit your county, hit your state legislature. They all have a role to play.
Okay. So we got litigation, government, what was the third one? Media.
If you have a social media influence, any kind of social media influencer platform that you can help us broadcast this message, sign up on the forum so we know who you are. We're engaged on these social media platforms, but we recognize that there's a dire need for somebody to be. We need to get organizing the voices. Yeah. I don't want to
real information out is what it comes down to.
And so an example would just be, there's probably 10 sound bites from this that could become a sound on TikTok or Instagram and have you guys overlay it with your own footage of being out in this area and blow up the points I've made in the interview today. Like that would help a lot. I'm telling you accurate information.
Yeah.
And the podcast has an audience. That's great. Let's make sure this podcast audience gets 10x bigger than it normally does.
Right.
And through whatever
share it with all your friends, whatever you can do.
And so the way I envision that working is, if you're on that list, maybe we send you an email of this podcast and say, there's a lot of good information. You guys are people, run with it. Go build something out of it. Help us amplify this, because we don't have the time or the resources to do it all ourselves. Yeah. And it's going to be a lot more effective if you guys do it organically anyway. Yeah.
UGC. Cool. So media, for industry.
When you see us tagging and recognizing our supporters, look at that list. If your favorite business, let's invite them into, we don't want to bully them. We don't want to threaten them. Yeah. Let's say, hey, this is a plan. This is something worth fighting for. This is something worth you ought to be there. And then let's have the conversation of how do we make that worth your time and donations, whatever it is, so that you as a business being part of this fight, because you should. Because I understand not wanting to get in it because of the risks. This administration punishes, and you sign up for a fight like this, you could be labeled one. So I appreciate everybody putting their business. We don't have to, we will talk about how we meet you are. Yeah. But there's no limit to the amount of support we would accept. Yeah.
There you go. And then what was the last and fifth part?
To go become an activist that your experiences are part of this fight. Yes. The whole purpose of this Lost Trails guidebook is to help educate. How do I go find these that becomes part of a fight and you won't regret it. Yeah. There are awesome areas out there that are unexplored. There are groups that want to shut them down. You need to go find and fall in love with these areas. And then once you've done that, let us know. Yeah. I want to see the media posts of people out there on these lost trails and showcasing and celebrating what we're about to lose, so that it shows the truth of what's really happening. Yeah. Go out there, put on a GoPro, put a thing on your dashboard, and let's count the side-by-sides. That is a challenge. The impacts aren't there. Go document that for us. Go prove whether what I gave you a fact. Go prove me right or wrong. Yeah. And I know my own experience, and my experience tells me what I said, which is the impacts aren't there. Go I dare anybody to go prove me wrong. Yeah. Because I know what I saw. And if you're out there, I need 1,000 more voices backing me up. Say, yeah, I was there. I didn't see anybody.
Yeah.
How is this? How are we saving the environment by restricting the almost nobody that's here from being here? On some of these trails. And so so become an activist explorer. What you're doing when you're out recreating on public land is a political act. You need to and make sure that becomes the fight. That's all I want. And so that's step number 5. And that should be the most fun part of all of this.
Yeah. That's the whole point of it all, is to get out there and explore and do what we love doing anyways. So if you can do it, but just become an activist with it and report the data, report your findings, report what you're seeing out there.
Tell the story.
Tell the story.
You being out there. That's what we're doing this for. Like when everybody asks us why we do it, you can go have those yourself, you love, with kids, with the families, with the memories, with the friends. That's the irreparable damage we're all going to suffer. More and more closed. Yeah. It's almost impossible to quantify the meaningful. But if you're just passively letting it happen and you quietly enjoy and treasure those experiences within your own mind and in your own circle of influence, then that's not being put to use in the fight. And it's unfortunate. It needs to become a bigger part of our cultural experience is what that is. Yeah. Is a valuable part of this too. Yeah. And we hear a lot about protecting cultural and the off-road community culture. Yeah. These trails are our cultural resource. They have historical value, cultural value. They benefit us as a society. They benefit us as individuals. They have public benefits. Those impacts rarely get analyzed because we have not done it. Yeah, fair point. Very good point. So, well, cool, man. We'll definitely, I think we're going to get you back on to talk about more of government structure and 30 by 30 and 50 by 50. I could probably get you a whole panel of people that are all across the board on that in different areas because of this conference we do. There's all kinds of fighting. Wow. We're one of the big groups really focusing on how that's impacting recreation, but that's impacting food, agriculture, transportation, everything, economy, subordinate to that agenda, and that's everything you buy, gas, all of it will get a lot more expensive or unavailable. If they, I didn't even think, I was thinking in terms of recreational opportunity. I didn't think of it in terms of economy or infrastructure, it's everything, transportation, energy, everything. You're absolutely right. That's going to be crazy. That's nuts. The agenda. That's nuts. What's driving that's what wakes these people up in them. So, and they're getting away with it mostly because of complacency in the population, because they have extremely broad. They have kind of engineered, manufactured public relations support firms they hire to kind of manufacture and produce, but you go meet with the people impacted category. Wow. All the regulation down the pike. And it's hitting us. I mean, it's definitely this labyrinth one slip on them, and that was a huge impact to us. Yeah. So imagine if that's happening every day across the street to all different everybody, not just user, not just us. Yeah. But that's what this current administration, kind of how this was working. It'll only go so far. Like, at some point, it's got to overcorrect. When it does, that's where you need to have the movements prepared, these ready there, and replace the broken side. Yeah. It's my long term. Gotcha. Cool. Well, awesome, man. If people want to get in touch with you, figure out more information, ask questions, support BRC, how can they do that? So a few places. So sharetrails.org is our website, and a lot of information about everything. And so go poke around. We're on all the social media, Blue Ribbon Cool. If you search for Blue Ribbon Cool, and we put TikTok, and Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. We're on all of it. We have a podcast called Defend Your Ground Podcast. If you go search Defend Your Ground on any of your podcasts, we talk about. And then LostTrailsGuidebook.com. Okay. Is where people can go order a Lost Trails guidebook. Cool. And those are all the places to find us. Sweet. I like it, man. Cool. If anybody out there has questions, definitely get a hold of Ben over at Blue Ribbon Coalition. If you guys want to filter them through the podcast, you guys can do that too. You guys know how to get a hold of us. We got the voicemail as well. I can send a voicemail over to you and let you reply. That'd be fun. Do it. Yeah, man. Thanks so much for coming down in the middle of Trail Hero and talking about what the fuck just happened in Moab. And happy to be here. Sorry to break the news. I know, right? I'm still blown away at the decision that got made, and it should be. It should be enough. It should piss everybody off. Everybody should be motivated to action by it. It was that bad. Yes, it was. So we hope to hear from you. Cool, awesome, man. Well, thanks for coming down. Any final words for everybody out there? Defend your ground. I like it. And with that, my friends, keep crawling.